All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be focusing on humanities majors in Korea.
Okay.
So we're talking history, literature, philosophy, all those good things.
Right.
We've got some really cool interviews with Korean humanities grads, and I think you're going to be surprised by some of the insights that we're going to uncover.
I think so, too.
So, I mean, when you think about it, it's really easy to kind of fall into this trap of assumptions about what people with a humanities degree, what they actually end up doing.
It's true.
But these interviews really show, like, a totally different perspective,
Yeah.
like really diverse paths and all these unexpected challenges.
Right.
And then ultimately, like, this theme of the value of a humanities education.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
kind of keeps coming up over and over, which
Yeah.
I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that that stood out to me right away was this interview with a philosophy major.
Okay.
And he was saying that he actually went into philosophy to try and answer those big existential questions.
Right.
Like, what's the meaning of life? All that.
Of course. Yeah.
But what's so interesting is that even after years of study, he realized that, like, finding those concrete answers,
Right.
it wasn't really the point,
Oh, that's interesting.
which I thought was so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the irony of philosophy sometimes.
Yeah.
You go in looking for answers and you come out with more questions.
Exactly.
But it's not really about, getting those definitive answers. It's more about learning how to ask the right questions, how
Yeah.
to, deal with ambiguity,
Right.
and then just develop those critical thinking skills. It's a real powerful tool
Totally.
for navigating a world that's, pretty complex.
Absolutely. And it's like maybe the journey is more important than the destination
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not always a linear path either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like another interview that really caught my eye was this one with a history enthusiast, right? This guy wasn't on a traditional academic track at all,
Mm-hmm.
but he was so passionate about history
Oh, wow.
that he ended up getting really deep into these online communities that were all focused on historical research.
Okay.
And he ended up writing like academic papers, not for a degree, but just for the love of it.
Wow, that's real dedication.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
I think it shows how, powerful, passion-driven learning can be,
Yeah.
right? And how you don't always need those formal institutions
He
to
chose
become
some.
an expert in something.
Actually.
Sometimes it's those rabbit holes that we go down that lead to these, incredible discoveries.
Totally. It really makes you think, like, what am I really passionate about?
Yeah,
Where could that lead?
exactly.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, like, the reality of being a humanities student in Korea.
Okay.
Because one history student talked about being really surprised by the lack of, like, intellectual debate in the classroom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he kind of went in expecting, lively discussions and a focus on these big questions. But it turned out that a lot of his classmates were more focused on, like, practical career goals.
Yeah, I think that kind of reflects the bigger picture of the Korean education system, which is, for people who aren't familiar with it, very competitive and career-focused.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure to succeed in this very kind of traditional sense.
Yeah.
And I think that can sometimes, overshadow that real value of just intellectual exploration,
Right.
for its own sake.
Yeah.
But it also brings up this question of how do we balance that pursuit of knowledge
Right.
with those, practical considerations of building a career?
It's a real dilemma, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of brings us to that whole conversation around the uselessness of the humanities, which we hear all the time,
Oh, yeah.
right? That humanities degrees don't lead to high-paying jobs.
Mm.
They're not relevant in this, tech-driven world and all that. But as we go deeper into these interviews, you start to see a totally different picture emerge.
Interesting.
And what's really cool is that, some people did talk about being concerned about that lack of practical skills,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to technology and things like that.
Right.
But they also highlighted all these unique strengths that they developed
Okay.
through their humanities education.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
And one person even framed it as having developed, like, meta skills.
What does that mean?
So, like, they might not have known a specific software,
Okay.
but because they had this background in research and analysis, they could learn it really quickly.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
So it's not about the specific skill, but the ability to acquire new skill.
exactly.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's not just about memorizing facts or mastering one specific skill set.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about developing a way of thinking
Okay.
approaching problems, communicating,
Yeah.
all that, which can be applied in so many different areas of life.
Absolutely.
And speaking of value, there was this really interesting point about how, philosophy students, they're always having their arguments challenged,
Oh, yeah.
like constantly being critiqued,
Right.
which, I mean, can be tough, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But they talked about how that whole process of, like, defending your ideas, refining your arguments, considering different perspectives,
Yeah.
it's actually really valuable training for critical thinking,
Oh, absolutely.
like a mental boot camp,
Yeah, it's true.
makes you sharper.
Yeah.
And I imagine those skills are super useful,
Right.
not just in academia, but in any field where you have to make decisions, solve problems,
Yeah,
persuade people, all that.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
It's like any skill, the more you practice it, the better you get. And then there was this really touching story from someone who said they actually found, like, solace and guidance in literature
Right.
when they were going through, like, some tough times in their life.
Wow.
Yeah, they talked about how the stories they read
Hmm.
really helped them understand human nature,
Oh, that's cool.
different perspectives,
Yeah.
and ultimately helped them make decisions that felt right for them, aligned with their values.
That's powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you think about the role of the humanities in, like, shaping how we understand ourselves
Hmm.
and the world.
Yeah, it's not just about gaining knowledge. It's
No.
about, developing empathy
Yeah.
and wisdom and having that framework to make sense of all these crazy situations that we find ourselves in.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we navigate this crazy world?
Exactly.
And sometimes humanities can give us some clues,
Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty cool stuff.
I agree.
So we've talked about, like, the broader value of the humanities, right? But what about, like, the nitty-gritty of life after graduation?
Right.
Especially in a place like Korea, where the job market's so competitive.
Yeah.
A lot of the people we talked to were really honest about the challenges they faced,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to finding work that's both, like, meaningful and pays the bills,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, several of the folks we interviewed who went on to do, like, further studies in the humanities, they
Right.
talked about having to make, like, real financial sacrifices. They
Yeah.
were talking about delaying gratification, living super frugally,
Mhm.
and just dealing with the uncertainty of, an academic career.
Yeah, it's not an easy path, that's for sure.
No, it takes a lot of dedication
Yeah,
and a lot of resilience.
totally. And there's this tension, right, between following your passions and then those practical things you got to consider when you're trying to build a life. But what was really cool to see was that even the people who went into, like, more traditional careers,
Mm-hmm.
they still found ways to use their humanities background
Oh, interesting.
in ways you wouldn't really expect.
Like what?
So there's this one person who majored in history,
Okay.
and he was saying that his knowledge of, like, historical events and trends,
Mm-hmm.
it actually helped him make business decisions.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Right. Like, who would have thought?
Yeah, it shows you how those seemingly unrelated fields can actually connect and inform each other.
Yeah, it's all about connecting the dots,
Mm.
seeing the patterns, drawing insights from different places.
Right.
And I think that's something that humanities majors are really good at.
They're kind of trained for that, right?
Totally.
They're trained to think critically, analyze things from different angles, synthesize ideas from all these different sources.
It's like having that broad humanities foundation gives you this, like, mental agility,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you could see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Make connections other people might miss.
Definitely.
And sometimes those connections can lead to some really cool career paths.
Like what?
So we talked to this philosophy major
Okay.
who ended up becoming a successful YouTuber.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And he was saying that all those analytical thinking skills that he, like, honed through years of philosophical debate
Right.
actually helped him make these really compelling arguments online
That makes sense.
and engage with his audience.
Yeah, I mean, it really challenges that idea that a humanities degree can't lead to success in the digital world.
Right.
Like, those critical thinking skills are, like, more valuable than ever now with all this information overload and all these different narratives flying around.
Right. You got to be able to cut through all that noise.
Exactly.
And a lot of the people we talked to emphasized that their humanities background
Mm-hmm.
made them more adaptable,
Yeah.
more empathetic, more able to see things from multiple perspectives.
And those are all qualities that are super important these days.
Right. In our crazy interconnected world.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that human element in every situation,
Right.
whether you're in business, tech, whatever.
Right.
Being able to understand where other people are coming from,
Yeah.
communicate effectively, build relationships.
It's all connected.
It's essential. And those are all skills that you get from a humanities education.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder, right, if in our pursuit of all this specialization and technical skills, if we're forgetting about some of those like fundamental human qualities,
Like what?
like empathy, critical thinking, ethical reasoning.
Right. Those are things you can't just program into a computer.
Exactly. And it's what a lot of people brought up when we asked them about like the bigger societal role of the humanities.
Oh, interesting.
Like they felt that in a world that's increasingly shaped by technology, we need humanistic thinking more than ever.
What do you mean by that?
Like we need people who can grapple with the ethical implications of all these technological advancements, who can understand the historical and cultural contexts of social issues,
Right.
and who can like advocate for human values in this rapidly changing world.
Yeah, so it's not just about the technology itself,
Right.
but how we use it and what it means for us as humans.
Exactly.
That's a really important point.
It's like the humanities give us this framework for thinking about the big picture, for considering the human consequences of our actions,
Right.
and for making sure that progress actually serves humanity.
Instead of the other way around.
Right. And that reminds me of this one person we talked to, a real literature enthusiast.
Okay.
And they were saying how they found so much comfort and guidance in books
Yeah.
when they were facing like major life decisions.
Wow.
They said the stories they read gave them all these different perspectives,
Oh, that's cool.
helped them understand human nature better, and ultimately helped them make choices that like aligned with their values.
That's beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like art and literature can give us this wisdom and insight.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond just the practical stuff.
Absolutely.
They help us explore different ways of being, grapple with ethical dilemmas,
Yeah.
and find meaning and purpose in our lives.
It's about more than just learning facts and figures.
Right.
It's about like nourishing our inner selves,
Exactly.
our sense of empathy, our ability to deal with all the, ups and downs of being human.
Totally. And this idea of lifelong learning, it kept coming up over and over again in these interviews.
Oh, interesting.
Even the folks who had like moved on from academia,
Yeah.
they were still reading, exploring, engaging with ideas from the humanities.
That's great.
They saw their education as like a foundation
Yeah.
for continued growth, both intellectually and personally.
It's inspiring to see that passion for learning. Like it doesn't just end when you graduate.
Totally. It's like humanities education equips you with these tools
Yeah.
and this mindset to just keep learning, to adapt to new challenges, and just keep growing and evolving throughout your life.
And I think that really speaks to what we've been talking about this whole time, right? That
Yeah.
enduring value of a humanities education. It's not just about memorizing things or mastering one specific skill. It's about cultivating those essential human qualities
Yeah,
that make us who we are.
totally. Like our ability to think critically, connect with others,
Yeah.
find meaning in the world.
Absolutely.
It's pretty amazing stuff.
I agree.
So before we wrap things up, I'm
Okay.
curious, what's resonated with you so far?
Oh, that's a good question.
What stories or insights have like really stuck with you? What questions has this sparked for you?
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey exploring these experiences,
It really has.
I think it really shows you, like, how much more there is to a humanities education
Yeah.
than people might realize.
Right. Like it challenges those assumptions that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
And, one thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of finding your niche.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's not just about picking history or literature,
Right.
but it's about like really discovering those specific areas within the humanities that like really light you up,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And one interview that really stood out to me was this student who loved German language and culture,
Okay.
but they found traditional German studies like a little too broad. And they ended up stumbling upon historical linguistics
Wow.
and realized that like that was it.
That was their thing.
That was their passion.
That's awesome.
Right. And it shows how important it is to, like, specialize within the humanities, too.
Yeah, to go deeper.
Yeah, beyond the surface.
Find those threads that really speak to you.
And sometimes that takes a bit of exploration.
Right. Some trial and error.
Wholly. Like, we talked to another student who started out in history,
Okay.
but ended up switching to education
Oh, wow.
because they realized that, like, teaching was their real calling,
Yeah.
you know?
It's a good reminder that, like, it's okay to change your mind,
Totally.
you know, as you go.
It's a journey, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it makes me think about, like, the support that's out there for humanities students, especially when it comes to careers.
Right.
Like, a few people felt that universities could do more to help students, like, connect their studies to the real world.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and to explore, like, all those different career options.
Yeah, because career services often focus on those fields with those more, like, straightforward paths.
Right, exactly.
But humanities majors, they have all these skills and interests.
Totally.
So they need a different kind of guidance.
So, like, we need a whole different approach to career counseling.
I think so, yeah.
For humanities students,
Mhm.
like, instead of just focusing on specific job titles or industries, it's more about helping them figure out,
Yeah.
what are your transferable skills? What are your values?
Right.
What kind of problems do you want to solve in the world?
Yeah, like, what are you passionate about?
Exactly.
That's a great way to put it.
And one thing that really impressed me throughout all these interviews was the resilience of these humanities grads.
Oh, yeah.
They faced, like, doubts from other people,
Right.
financial hurdles, uncertainty about the future,
Yeah.
but they kept going.
They kept at it.
They adapted.
That's amazing.
They found ways to create meaningful lives and careers.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
Right. It really shows you that a humanities education can give you more than just knowledge. It gives you, like, this mindset,
Right.
a way to approach those challenges,
Totally.
a resilience that can help you navigate all the ups and downs of life.
And that, I think, brings us back to what we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
Like, that lasting value of a humanities education, it's not about memorizing facts.
Right.
It's not about mastering one particular skill.
It's about who you become.
Yeah, it's about cultivating those human qualities that make us, well, us.
Right. And as we wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
I'm left with this thought, you know, in a world that's so focused on the practical,
Yeah.
the measurable.
Right. The bottom line.
We can't forget about the power of the humanities
Absolutely.
to, like, nourish our souls,
Mhm.
to ignite our curiosity,
Yeah.
to inspire us to imagine
Makes you rate a better world.
a better world. Exactly.
Beautiful.
So keep asking those big questions.
Keep exploring.
Keep digging deep.
And never stop learning.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll see you next time.